Good evening. I'm glad you've joined me tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable position, let your shoulders soften, and allow your breath to slow. The day is behind you now. All that matters is this quiet moment. Tonight I'll be here with you, guiding your mind gently into rest. My name is Jonathan Holly, and together we'll drift into a world of mystery, calm, and sleep. You don't need to think or solve or do anything at all. Just let my voice carry you deeper into stillness. Now, let's begin our mystery story for tonight. London, 1886. The gas lamps burned low, their halos drowning in fog as if the city itself wished to hide its sins. In a narrow street off Fleet Lane, the clatter of hooves echoed, then stilled. A carriage door opened, and out stepped a man draped in a black coat, the brim of his hat shadowing eyes that had seen too much. Inspector Nathaniel Graves, once the most lauded mind in Scotland Yard, now a ghost among the living. His hand brushed the locket beneath his collar. Inside, the miniature portrait of his wife, Clara, watched him with eternal sorrow. It had been 7 years since the night she vanished, 7 years since the case that broke him. But tonight, fate knocked again. A sharp rapping at his door cut through the silence of his modest lodgings. 3 knocks, deliberate, precise. Graves opened the door to find a young constable, breathless, pale beneath the gaslight. "Inspector Graves." "There's been another one." The words fell like frost. "Another what, lad?" The constable hesitated, eyes flicking toward the fog outside. "The symbol, sir." The same as before, Graves felt the world narrow around him. He reached for his cane, not because he needed it, but because it steadied his trembling hand. "Where?" "Rookery Lane, sir." "Behind St. Bartholomew's." Moments later, his carriage tore through the mist. London's heart beat beneath him. The cries of drunks, the rattle of chains, the toll of midnight bells. As the wheels turned, so too did the ghosts of his mind. The last victim had been found near the docks, a mark carved into her wrist, a serpent swallowing its tail. Ouroboros. The constable swallowed hard as they arrived. "She's young, sir." Like the others, the scene was lit by lanterns that threw everything into sepia nightmare. A woman lay upon the cobbles, pale as candle wax, eyes open to nothing. Her gloved hand clutched a folded scrap of parchment. Graves knelt, heart pounding. The parchment bore an inked circle, the same serpent symbol, but beneath it, something new, a single word written in crimson. "Clara." The world tilted. Graves's breath caught, his pulse thundered. He looked up sharply, the fog seemed to ripple, and for a heartbeat, he swore he saw a woman's figure watching from the mist, her silhouette painfully familiar. Then she was gone. "Sir?" the constable whispered. Graves closed his hand around the parchment. "No one touches the body until I say. And for God's sake, not a word of this leaves the street." As the first drops of rain began to fall, he felt the past uncoil within him like a serpent awakened. The case was no longer about justice. It was personal. The rain lingered into dawn, turning the cobblestones of Rookery Lane to black glass. The fog hung low, thick with soot and secrets. Inspector Nathaniel Graves stood beneath a street lamp, its flicker painting brief ghosts upon his face. The girl's body had been taken, her name unknown, yet the single crimson word burned through his mind. Clara. Inside the station house, the gaslight hissed and sputtered. Papers sprawled across his desk, witness reports, sketches of the serpent sigil, and a map of London speckled with red ink. Each mark a death. 3 in the last month, each with the same symbol carved on the wrist, each found near a churchyard. Graves traced a line between them with a gloved finger. The pattern was closing in, a triangle converging on the heart of the city. "Inspector?" Sergeant Mallory entered, hat in hand. He was a broad man with weary eyes, loyal but cautious. "The coroner's report, sir. No sign of struggle. And that symbol, cut with precision, a practiced hand." Graves nodded absently. "And the parchment?" "Ordinary vellum, sir. But the ink, human blood." A silence followed. The inspector's jaw tightened. "Whose?" "We can't say." "Not the victim's." Graves dismissed him with a nod, but his mind whirled. A serpent devouring itself. The same sigil once drawn in his wife's journal, a month before she vanished. He'd dismissed it then as superstition, an artist's idle fancy. Now it returned like a curse. He opened his locket again. Clara's painted smile met his eyes, forever soft, forever distant. "What are you trying to tell me, my love?" He whispered. A knock at the door pulled him from reverie. Constable Finch, the same nervous lad from last night, stepped in. "Sir, there's someone to see you." "A woman. Name?" "She wouldn't give one, sir. Says she knows about the Rookery Lane killings." Graves's pulse quickened. "Send her in." The door creaked open. A tall woman entered, veiled in black. She moved like someone used to being unseen. The lamplight caught her gloved hands, delicate, trembling, and for an instant Graves thought he recognized the curve of her jaw beneath the veil. "You have information for me?" he asked, voice steady despite the storm within. Her reply came soft, melodic, touched by fear. "Information, yes, but not safety. They'll kill me if they know I spoke to you." "Who?" She hesitated. "The Circle, Inspector? The Order of Ouroboros. They've been here long before you." "Long before me." Graves leaned forward. "What do they want?" "To finish what they began years ago," she whispered. "To bring her back." "Bring who back?" She lifted her veil then, and though the face beneath was not Clara's, the resemblance was so uncanny that Graves felt his heart lurch. The same eyes, the same pale skin, as though fate were mocking him. The woman's gaze darted to the window. "They're watching. You have little time." And before he could stop her, she fled into the fog. Graves rushed after her. The name echoed through the stairwell of Graves's lodging, long after the sound had died. Nathaniel. The voice was unmistakable, its whisper trembling between love and lament. He stood motionless, soaked in rain, staring into the curling fog outside his doorway. For years he had dreamed of hearing Clara again. Tonight it had followed him home. He shut the door and leaned his cane against the wall. The room seemed different now, colder, heavier. Shadows bent oddly beneath the lamplight, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. Her scent. He swallowed hard and turned up the flame. "Imagination," he muttered. "Fatigue and folly." But something in him knew better. His eyes moved to the floorboards near the hearth, warped, scarred with age. That night, 7 years ago, he had hidden Clara's last letters there. He hadn't opened them since. Not once. But the whisper had come from beneath his feet. He knelt, pried loose the first plank. Dust swirled in the lamplight. Beneath lay the small wooden box, just as he had left it, though now the brass latch was broken, as if forced open by unseen hands. Inside were the letters, and something new. A sheet of parchment, folded carefully, bearing the same serpent sigil. His heart lurched. Someone had been in his room. The ink was still damp. The message brief. She lives in the reflection. He stood abruptly, the floor creaking beneath him. His reflection stared back from the small mirror on the mantel, weary, haunted, uncertain. He stepped closer, and for a heartbeat the reflection smiled though he had not. The smile was hers, Clara's, soft and terrible in its familiarity. Graves staggered back, breath shallow. No, no, this cannot be. A sudden knock shattered the moment. 3 sharp raps. He drew his revolver and opened the door, only to find Sergeant Mallory, eyes wide. "Good Lord, Nathaniel, you look half dead," Mallory said. "We've found something. You'd best come quick. What is it?" "The parish record from St. Bartholomew's. A name tied to all 3. Victims." Mallory hesitated, lowering his voice. "They all worked for a patroness, Lady Evangeline Dorn." Graves's face went pale. "Dorn, the philanthropist? The widow of Lord Dorn?" "The same. Lives out near Blackfriars. Her household's on the registry." Graves pocketed the parchment, straightened his coat. "Fetch the carriage." As they rode through the rain, he stared out at London's labyrinth of light and shadow. Lady Dorn, known for her charities, her schools for destitute girls. The city called her an angel, but Graves had learned long ago that angels often wore masks. The carriage drew near the Dorn estate, a mansion of stone and silence. Gaslights glimmered across its iron gates, and beyond them the faintest strains of a piano drifted through the night, a melody he knew too well, Clara's lullaby. Graves froze. "Stop the carriage." Mallory frowned. "What is it?" The Dorn mansion loomed like a cathedral of stone and secrets. Iron gates groaned open at their approach, and the carriage wheels crunched on wet gravel. Gaslight flickered through the fog, revealing marble statues half consumed by ivy, angels with broken wings, saints with faces eroded to blankness. Inspector Graves stepped down, coat heavy with rain. Mallory followed, lantern in hand, its glow trembling across the brass knocker, shaped like a serpent biting its tail. Ouroboros. The symbol again. "Cheerful lot, aren't they?" Mallory muttered. Graves ignored the comment and struck the knocker 3 times. The sound echoed into the depths of the mansion. After a long pause, the door creaked open to reveal a butler, tall, expressionless, his skin pale as wax. "Lady Dorn is not receiving visitors," he said. "She will receive me," Graves replied, flashing his warrant card. "Inspector Nathaniel Graves, Scotland Yard. This concerns a matter of murder." The butler's eyes flickered, not surprise, but something colder. "Very well, Inspector. If you insist." They were led through halls draped in shadow. Oil portraits lined the walls, solemn men and women, gazing down through centuries of privilege. The air smelled faintly of lily and decay. Somewhere a clock ticked with surgical precision. At last they entered a parlor lit by a dozen candles. There, seated at a pianoforte, was Lady Evangeline Dorn. She was younger than Graves expected, perhaps 30, yet her composure had the weight of centuries. Her gown shimmered like spilled ink, and her eyes, pale gray, regarded him with the calm of someone accustomed to being feared. "Inspector Graves," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I wondered when the yard would call. You seem remarkably informed for someone not under suspicion," Graves replied. A faint smile. "Informed, perhaps, but not surprised. The city whispers, and the dead are never silent for long." Mallory shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the serpent emblem engraved into the piano lid. Graves stepped closer. "3 women are dead, Lady Dorn, all in your employ, all bearing a symbol that also adorns your home." Her fingers brushed the piano keys, coaxing a single note, low, mournful. "You misunderstand, Inspector. The serpent is not a mark of death, but of eternity. The Ouroboros represents rebirth, continuity. Surely you of all men can appreciate the desire to bring something lost back into being." Her words struck too close. Graves stiffened. "You speak as if the murders serve a purpose." She smiled faintly. "Perhaps they do. Perhaps they are only a shadow of what's to come." Mallory opened his mouth to protest, but a sudden sound beneath the floor silenced them all. A dull, rhythmic thud. Then another. A chain clinking. Graves's eyes met hers. "What was that?" "Rats, no doubt," she said smoothly. But her hands trembled ever so slightly. Without waiting for permission, the discordant notes of the piano seeped through the stone walls like the pulse of a restless heart. Inspector Graves stood frozen before the mirror, the image of his dead wife shimmering within the glass. Her eyes seemed to plead for release, her lips trembling with a word that never quite formed. Mallory, pale and sweating, raised his lantern. The reflection flickered for a moment, showing both men, then only Clara, standing alone in a gray void that swallowed the light. "Inspector," Mallory whispered, that's not possible." Graves's voice was low. "No, but it's real." He reached toward the glass. The surface rippled, cool as water. A pulse of air escaped it, faint, warm, like a dying breath. Graves snatched back his hand. "It's alive," he muttered. Mallory crossed himself. "Whatever this is, sir, it's unholy. We should bring the constables." "Not yet." Graves's eyes burned. "If Clara's image appears here, there's a reason. Someone wants me to see her." Mallory swallowed. "But why?" Before Graves could answer, a sound rose from the shadows, soft scraping, metal against stone. They turned. A figure emerged from the corner of the room, crawling rather than walking. A woman, filthy, trembling, her eyes wild with fear. "Help, please," she rasped. Graves knelt beside her. "Who are you?" She flinched from the light. "One of the chosen. One of the—" Her voice broke into sobs. "They said we would be reborn, but she lied." "Who lied?" Graves pressed. "Lady Dorn," she whispered. "She said she could bring her back. The mirror, it needs blood." Before he could question her further, the woman convulsed. A deep red line appeared across her wrist, opening as if carved by invisible hands. She screamed once, then fell silent. The mirror shimmered again. Clara's reflection smiled, faintly, heart-breakingly, and vanished into darkness. Mallory backed away, voice shaking. "We're leaving, Graves, now?" Graves rose slowly, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Get the coroner? I'll see to Lady Dorn." They stormed up the stairs. The piano had stopped. The parlor was empty. The butler was gone. Only the faint scent of lily lingered, sweet and nauseating. Graves tore open the study doors. Empty. Drawers ajar, papers scattered, diagrams of alchemical symbols, sketches of human anatomy overlaid with a serpent emblem, and in the center of the desk a single silver locket. He froze. It was Clara's. Mallory lifted it carefully. How in God's name? Graves took it from him, hands trembling. This was buried with her effects. I saw it lowered into her coffin myself. From somewhere above, floorboards creaked. Both men looked up. A faint light flickered from the third floor, Lady Dorn's private chambers. Graves's voice hardened. She's still here. He ascended the stairs, revolver drawn, the air thick with dust and dread. The door at the end of the hall stood slightly ajar. The air in Lady Dorn's chamber was heavy with the scent of myrrh and something fouler, the copper tang of blood masked by perfume. The room seemed to pulse with a slow, unnatural rhythm, as though it breathed through the walls. Inspector Graves stared at the marble slab. The figure that lay upon it was unmistakable, the delicate jawline, the pale skin, the auburn hair resting in waves across her shoulders. Clara, his wife. He moved forward in disbelief, his revolver lowering of its own accord. "No, this is a trick," he murmured. "Some cruel imitation." Lady Dorn stood by the slab, her expression calm, almost maternal. "You think me a charlatan, Inspector, but I assure you, flesh remembers. Spirit lingers. The mirror is but a door, and doors can be reopened." Graves's voice cracked. "She's dead. I buried her with my own hands, and yet here she lies," Dorn whispered, "brought across by sacrifice, each girl a step nearer the bridge, each offering a whisper stronger than the last. You should thank me, for I did this for you." "For me?" "Because you couldn't let her go. Every night your grief called to her. Every tear, every dream, it beckoned her back." He stepped closer, trembling. "You speak madness." "Madness?" She smiled faintly. "No, faith." Mallory's lantern wavered as he muttered, "This is devil's work." Lady Dorn ignored him. She lifted a small vial from the table, a clear liquid glinting in the candlelight. One final act, and she will awaken. Her soul waits behind the glass. Do you not hear her, Inspector? And indeed he did, a soft, broken hum. Clara's lullaby, faint but rising, threading through the air like a ghost returning home. Graves felt the strength leave his knees. If this is truly her, then why hide it in shadows? Why murder for it? "Because the living must pay the toll for the dead," Dorn said simply. She moved to pour the vial's contents upon Clara's lips, but Graves lunged forward, knocking it from her grasp. The glass shattered, spilling a dark, viscous fluid that hissed where it touched the marble. Lady Dorn shrieked. "You fool! Do you think you can deny her twice?" The room quaked. Every mirror on the walls rippled violently, their veils fluttering as if caught in a phantom wind. From within the reflections, faces pressed against the glass, the murdered girls, their eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Mallory stumbled back, crossing himself. "We need to leave?" But Graves stood rooted. The mirrors were drawing the light inward, feeding on the chaos. And in their depths, Clara's reflection turned her head toward him, eyes wide, lips parting. "Nathaniel," she whispered. He took a step forward. The voice was so clear, so painfully familiar. "Clara, is it truly you?" Her image trembled. "Help me." "She won't let me go." Lady Dorn lunged for the pistol, screaming, "She belongs to me." Graves fired. The sound shattered the air. The bullet struck the great mirror behind her. The carriage wheels clattered through the empty London streets, scattering puddles of cold light. Graves sat opposite Mallory, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone white. Between them, in a small velvet pouch, lay the broken shard he'd taken from the Dorn mirror, a piece no larger than a coin, yet faintly luminescent, pulsing like a living heart. Neither man spoke for several minutes. The rain hissed against the glass, and in its rhythm Graves thought he heard faint words. "Help me." Mallory finally broke the silence. "We should have left that thing behind." "There's poison in it, sir, not the kind a doctor can cure." Graves stared out at the fog. "If it truly holds a trace of Clara, I can't abandon it." Mallory frowned. "And if it's something else wearing her voice?" Graves said nothing. He only touched the locket at his throat, the metal warm despite the chill. When they reached the yard, dawn was little more than a pale bruise behind the rooftops. Clerks and constables were already bustling, unaware that the city's newest nightmare had roots far older than their science could name. Graves entered his office and laid the shard upon his desk blotter. In the morning light it looked harmless, yet the surface seemed to breathe. He fetched a magnifying glass, and beneath its lens tiny patterns emerged, interlocking circles and serpentine shapes, etched as if by fire. Symbols identical to those carved beneath Dorn's house. "Ah!" Graves's heart dropped. Already? An hour passed. Same markings. "But the body," Finch faltered. "Sir, the body's at your address." For a moment the world spun. "My lodging?" Finch nodded. "Door forced. Neighbors heard someone crying your name." Graves snatched his coat and hurried through the corridors, Mallory close behind. When they reached the narrow street of his rooms, the crowd had gathered, whispering behind gloved hands. Inside, the parlor was in ruin, floorboards splintered, glass scattered, the faint scent of myrrh lingering like an unwanted memory. The victim lay near the hearth. A young woman, her face peaceful, almost serene. In her palm a letter sealed with crimson wax bearing the serpent crest. Graves knelt, throat tightening. The letter was addressed not to him, but to Clara Graves. He broke the seal. Inside, "One remains, and the circle shall close. When the serpent eats its tail, she will stand beside you again." Mallory whispered, "She's still working through them, even from the grave." But Graves's eyes were fixed on the mirror above the mantel. The glass was cracked, and within the fracture something shimmered, a movement that did not belong to any reflection in the room. A woman's silhouette appeared behind him in the glass, reaching out a pale hand toward his shoulder. He turned sharply. Nothing there. Yet the shard on his desk back at the yard began, at that very moment, to glow. The crypt beneath St. Bartholomew's was older than the church that crowned it. Graves had visited before in routine inquiry, never imagining that the worn stair, spiraling below the altar, would one day pull him into his own damnation. Now his lantern carved a narrow cone through centuries of dust, while Mallory followed, pistol drawn, breath steaming in the cold. The heartbeat came first as vibration, traveling through the soles of their boots, slow, deliberate, measured as a clock. Graves knelt, touched the stone. It seemed to throb beneath his palm. "Alive," he murmured. Mallory muttered, "Stones don't live, sir." "Then what's buried here does." They reached the bottom, a corridor of arches slick with moisture. Symbols glimmered faintly on the walls, drawn in some metallic substance that caught the lamplight like veins of gold. At intervals, niches held statues' hooded figures holding serpents in both hands, their eyes hollow. Each pedestal bore a single word carved in Latin: Vita per mortem, life through death. At the far end stood a heavy door of iron and oak, sealed with chains and the wax of a crimson sigil. Graves produced a crowbar from his satchel. Mallory hissed, "We'll hang for desecration if the clergy catches us." Graves's eyes were cold. "If what's inside killed those women and my wife, then damn the clergy." With a wrench and a groan, the lock gave way. Warm air spilled out, smelling of salt and copper. They entered a circular chamber, lined with candles that had long since burned to stubs. In the center lay a stone table, and upon it an object like an altar fused to a machine. Glass tubes, clockwork gears, and veins of mercury ran into a crystal vessel the size of a heart. It beat once, then again. Mallory took a step back. "Good Lord!" Graves leaned in, examining the tubes. Inside them flowed a faint red light, pulsing toward the heart-shaped crystal. Each pulse made the walls shimmer. For a blink, the room became a reflection of itself, dark figures standing where the statues should have been watching. Pinned beneath the table was a parchment, brittle with age. Graves lifted it carefully and read aloud. "The circle must remain unbroken. The mirror is the gate. The heart is the key. 3 vessels of innocence, 1 of love. When the heart awakens, the beloved returns." He lowered the page, jaw tight. 3 vessels, Mallory said. The murdered girls, and the 4th. Graves stared at the glowing crystal. "Is me." The heart pulsed faster, responding to his voice. From the tubes came a hiss like whispering breath. The light flared briefly, forming Clara's outline upon the wall, faint and sorrowful. "Nathaniel," it breathed, "stop the blood before it completes the circle." Then the light died. Only the echo of her warning remained. Mallory grabbed his arm. "Sir, whatever that thing is, we destroy it now." Graves hesitated. The heart's rhythm matched his own. He felt it each beat synchronized. The building rose from the fog like a citadel of logic, but tonight its windows looked blind, its corridors too quiet. Graves carried the folded parchment inside his coat and felt the faint vibration of the heart below the streets, still echoing in his chest. Inside, the familiar scent of ink and pipe smoke greeted them. Clerks bent over ledgers, boots squeaked on the tiled floor. Yet something was wrong. Conversation stopped when Graves entered. Eyes followed him with unease. News of the Dorn mansion had spread. He could almost hear the whispers. Madness, Mirror's obsession with his dead wife. Superintendent Harcourt awaited him in the office upstairs, a man carved from bureaucracy's silver hair, immaculate waistcoat, and a stare polished to contempt. "Inspector Graves," he said, steepling his fingers, "you were instructed to suspend your investigation pending review. Instead, I receive reports of gunfire, trespass, and an aristocrat lying dead in her own home. Explain yourself." Graves placed the parchment on the desk. Lady Dorn was part of a society calling itself the Order of Obarus. 3 women are dead because of it. She meant to resurrect the dead through ritual murder. Harcourt's expression barely moved. Superstition. London breeds enough lunacy without your embellishment. It isn't superstition, Graves insisted. There's evidence in the crypts beneath St. Bartholomew's machinery, alchemical devices, destroyed now, no doubt, because you entered illegally. Harcourt's tone sharpened. You've gone too far, Nathaniel. You're suspended effective immediately. Mallory started forward. Sir, enough? Harcourt barked. Escort him home, Sergeant, and see that he stays there. Graves stared at the man's signet ring as he spoke an ornate serpent swallowing its tail. The same symbol. The room seemed to tilt. Where did you get that ring, Superintendent? He asked quietly. Harcourt froze, then smiled without warmth. Family heirloom, or order insignia? The older man's eyes glinted. Careful, Inspector. Conspiracy is an ugly refuge for guilt. 2 constables entered, standing at Harcourt's command. Graves realized then that the enemy wasn't only in crypts and mansions. It sat behind polished desks, cloaked in authority. He turned toward Mallory. We're done here, he said. As they stepped into the corridor, Harcourt called after him, voice smooth and cold. Let the dead rest, Graves. You'll end up among them. Outside, thunder cracked. Mallory muttered, He's one of them, isn't he? Graves nodded grimly. And he just told us how close we're getting. They walked through the courtyard where rain hammered the cobbles. From an upper window, a figure watched a silhouette unmistakably. Harcourt's yet beside him stood another shadow, taller, draped in what looked like a hooded cloak. When lightning flared, both shapes were gone. The fog in Whitechapel hung like a living thing, curling around lamp posts and climbing the walls of narrow alleys. Graves moved with deliberate steps, Mallory at his side, ears straining for the clatter of hooves. The carriage from earlier was still there, though its wheels made no sound as it vanished into the gray. Did she see us? Mallory whispered, unease written across his face. Graves shook his head, eyes fixed ahead. I think she wants to be found. A faint flicker of lantern light appeared at the end of the alley, disappearing behind a row of stacked barrels. Graves adjusted his coat and slipped into the shadows, boots muffled by wet cobbles. Mallory followed closely, muttering under his breath about the dangers of following ghosts. Then a soft creak metal against stone alerted them. The carriage had stopped at a warehouse at the river's edge. Its doors swung open, revealing the figure of the woman in black. She stepped down lightly, as though the fog itself had lifted to carry her. Graves' pulse quickened. The resemblance to Clara was undeniable. The same pale skin, auburn hair glimpsed beneath the hood, the same eyes that haunted his dreams. Yet this was not her. Not exactly. Inspector Graves, she said, voice low and deliberate, carrying a melody of sorrow and warning. You seek answers, but every step draws you deeper. The circle watches. They anticipate. Graves leveled his revolver. Who are you? What is this place? She raised a gloved hand, beckoning. Follow, if you dare. But beware the dead linger where the living tread. With Mallory behind him, Graves approached the warehouse. The wooden doors were cracked and splintered as if waiting to be forced open. Inside, the faint scent of incense mingled with damp stone. Candlelight flickered along stacked crates, casting shadows that writhed and twisted like snakes. Here, the woman said, stopping at a staircase leading downward. The next stage awaits beneath the city. Graves descended cautiously, lantern in hand. Mallory followed, whispering, "It smells of rot and blood." The staircase led to a chamber far larger than he expected, a hidden sanctum beneath the docks. The walls were covered in frescoes depicting serpents coiling around human figures, some alive, some skeletal. Candles burned along the edges, illuminating an altar at the center. Upon it lay 3 more vessels, small containers of crystal, each pulsing faintly with red light, matching the rhythm of the heart he had seen in the crypt. Graves froze. The vessels? The girls? "They are the keys," the woman whispered. "The circle intends to complete the 4th, the final bridge. Only then will she awaken." Mallory's hands shook. And the girl in the mirror? The woman's eyes softened, glinting in candlelight. She is caught between this world and the next. Every step the circle takes binds her further. If you do nothing, the heart will claim her, and the city will pay. Perfect. Here's part 11. The altar of F. the crystal vessels. Graves moved carefully, lantern in hand, every shadow around him seeming to twitch with life. Mallory trailed behind, clutching his pistol like a talisman. The woman in black stood before the altar, hands raised as if to ward off the unseen forces. "The circle is patient," she whispered, "but their patience has limits. If you hesitate, the final ritual will proceed." Graves' eyes scanned the chamber. Hooded figures began emerging from the corners, their robes brushing the wet stone floor. Faces were hidden, voices absent, yet the weight of their gaze pressed upon him. "This ends tonight," Graves muttered, stepping closer to the altar. The 3 vessels pulsed faster, synchronized with the heartbeat. From the crystal he had seen in St. Bartholomew's crypt, Clara's lullaby echoed faintly, threading through the chamber like a warning. Suddenly one of the hooded figures lunged toward the altar, and the woman in black let out a startled cry. Graves fired his bullet, struck metal, sparking against a hidden blade, but it gave Mallory a chance to tackle another figure to the ground. Chaos erupted. Amidst the struggle, Graves noticed something horrifying. One of the vessels had begun to glow more brightly, red light spilling across the altar. A thin, spectral hand seemed to rise from the vessel itself, reaching toward him. He staggered back, heart pounding, as a voice, Clara's, whispered through the chamber, "Nathaniel, hurry. They must not complete it." Graves lunged forward, grabbing a shard of crystal from the nearest vessel. The moment his hand touched it, the chamber seemed to pulse violently, shadows twisting and writhing like living snakes. One of the hooded figures moved faster than possible, attempting to strike him with a ceremonial dagger. Graves sidestepped, the blade grazing his coat, and brought the crystal down onto the altar. The impact shattered the surface. The red light flared, engulfing the room in a blinding glow. Screams echoed from the figures as they were thrown backward by a force Graves couldn't comprehend. When the light dimmed, the vessels lay broken, their contents leaking across the stone floor. The woman in black stumbled toward him. "It's done, but not entirely. One remains." Graves' eyes darted to the far side of the chamber. One hooded figure had escaped the chaos and was dragging something toward the spiral staircase, something pale, delicate, and bound. He moved with terrifying speed. Without thinking, Graves sprinted. Mallory followed, firing blindly as the figure disappeared into the shadows above. Graves' heart thundered. If they reached the final chamber, if the last ritual was completed, Clara would be lost forever. At the top of the stairs, the figure vanished into a narrow corridor, the walls lined with crates and rusted chains. Graves paused, chest heaving, listening. From the darkness came a faint, chilling whisper. The narrow corridor twisted like a serpent's spine. Graves moved cautiously, lantern shaking in his gloved hand. Mallory trailed, muttering prayers under his breath. Every footfall echoed, swallowed by the damp stone walls. Ahead, faint candlelight flickered, revealing the hooded figure dragging something across the floor. Graves' pulse quickened. The shape beneath the cloak was unmistakable, pale, delicate, unmistakably human. He rushed forward, heart hammering. Then a voice stopped him cold. "Nathaniel, don't." Graves spun toward the sound. Standing in a side alcove was the woman in black, her hood pulled back now. Her eyes were wide, the color of storm clouds. "It's not what you think. He's working with someone else. You must be careful." Before Graves could question her further, Mallory shouted from behind, "Inspector!" From the shadows, a second figure emerged, familiar, horrifying. Harcourt. The superintendent's cold, silver eyes gleamed in the lantern light. Around his neck hung the serpent ring, the symbol of the order. "Your little crusade ends here, Graves," Harcourt said smoothly, drawing a ceremonial dagger from beneath his coat. "The circle has waited long for your obedience." Graves' stomach turned. You're part of this?" Harcourt's smile was patient, deliberate. "I am their eye within Scotland Yard. I have watched, guided, and ensured you never left the path they intended." Mallory stepped forward, gun raised. "Sir, he's lying. Do you think loyalty to the law matters in the face of eternity?" Harcourt hissed. "Your wife, your obsession, they have all led to this moment." The hooded figure dragged the final vessel closer, placing it carefully on a stone pedestal. Graves realized with horror it was the last vessel, the one that would complete the ritual. Clara's fate balanced on the edge of the crystal. Graves stepped forward, revolver aimed. "You'll never finish this." Harcourt laughed softly. "You cannot comprehend what is already set in motion." The woman in black moved between them. "Nathaniel, trust me. You must separate the vessel from the heart. Only then can the circle be broken." Graves' hands shook, mind racing. The altar pulsed, red light bleeding through the cracks in the vessel, synchronized with the heartbeat from the crypt below. He understood now. The ritual wasn't just alchemy. It was feeding off his grief, the bond to Clara, using it to fuel the resurrection. Harcourt lunged. Graves fired, striking the superintendent's shoulder. Harcourt stumbled but recovered, dagger swinging. Mallory fired as well, grazing the cloak of the hooded figure. The chamber became a blur of shadow and movement. Graves dove toward the pedestal, yanking the vessel away from the crystal heart. Sparks erupted as his hand met the glowing surface. A scream rose, not Harcourt's, not Mallory's, but Clara's. The sound cut through him, sharp and desperate. The fog had thickened into a living wall by the time Graves and Mallory emerged from the hidden sanctum beneath the docks. Every gas lamp along the quay was shrouded. Every shadow seemed to slither. Somewhere in the distance, the low toll of a bell echoed against the water like a heartbeat of warning. From the edge of the canal, movement caught Graves' eye, a hooded figure slipping between warehouses, dragging something metallic. His pulse surged. "There, after him." Mallory drew his revolver. "Sir, that figure, he's fast." Graves sprinted along the cobblestones, boots splashing in puddles. The fog clung to his coat, wrapping him in damp confusion. Ahead, the figure vanished between two leaning warehouses. Graves caught the faint shimmer of the crystal vessels, remnants protruding from the cloak. A sudden leap onto a narrow dock startled him. Mallory followed, but the hooded figure had already vaulted onto a skiff tethered at the water's edge. The boat rocked violently as he pushed off. Graves didn't hesitate. He dove, plunging into the freezing canal. The water swallowed him. His lungs burned. Fingers brushed wood. He seized the skiff's edge. Mallory grabbed him, hauling him aboard. The hooded figure glanced back, eyes gleaming through the fog. A knife flashed in his hand. "You won't stop us." The figure hissed, voice muffled by the mist. Graves seized the edge of the boat, pulling himself toward him. The figure swung the knife, slicing the air dangerously close. Graves ducked, seizing a coil of rope and swinging it like a whip. It wrapped around the man's arm, yanking him off balance. The skiff lurched. Graves lunged forward, and Mallory shoved the man into the canal. He disappeared beneath the icy water with a muffled scream. Panting, Graves sat on the wet planks, heart hammering. "Is it over?" Mallory scanned the fog. "For now." But the vessel he had it. Graves' eyes narrowed. In the dim glow, he saw the crystal shards pulsing faintly in the water, reflecting Clara's face. It wasn't just a vessel, it was a beacon, a warning, a tether to the order. He reached into the canal with trembling hands, grasping the shards. The faint red pulse against his palm felt alive, sensed with the rhythm of the heartbeat he'd felt in the crypt. A whisper carried through the mist, soft and broken. "Nathaniel, hurry." The sound tore at him. It was Clara, not a reflection this time, not a memory but her, urging him onward. Mallory shivered. "Sir, she's speaking to you through that thing?" Graves did not answer. He secured the shards in his coat, eyes scanning the fog. Somewhere ahead, the Order was regrouping, plotting their next move. He knew they would not give up, not while Clara's life, or something far darker, remained in their hands. The alleyways of Whitechapel had grown silent. Only the distant drip of water and the faint cries of unseen animals broke the oppressive quiet. Graves pressed forward, Mallory closed behind, following the faint pulse of crimson light emanating from the shards he still held. Each flicker seemed to echo Clara's heartbeat, guiding them deeper into the labyrinth of London's underbelly. Ahead, a narrow stair descended into darkness. The stone steps were slick with moisture, and the air smelled of damp earth and decay. Graves adjusted his lantern and stepped carefully, boots echoing softly. The pulse grew stronger, vibrating through the very walls. At the bottom they entered a cavernous chamber. Gas lamps mounted along the walls flickered, casting tall, crawling shadows that seemed to watch their every move. In the center, a massive stone altar dominated the room, its surface etched with symbols of serpents, intertwined hands and eyes that seemed almost alive. Around the perimeter, dozens of hooded figures stood silently, their faces hidden in shadow. The woman in black stepped forward from the shadows, holding her hood back. Her eyes glinted with urgency. "Nathaniel?" The final ritual is about to begin. The circle believes that by completing it, Clara will be permanently bound to their control. You have only moments. Graves' jaw tightened. Where is she? The answer came from above. A platform suspended from chains creaked. There, on a dais of black stone, lay Clara, pale, fragile, yet unmistakably alive. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a heartbeat they locked with Graves. He took a step forward, but the air shifted violently. Hooded figures moved with unnatural speed, forming a ring around the altar. Harcourt emerged at the center, dagger in hand, the serpent ring gleaming on his finger. "Inspector Graves," he said, voice cold and deliberate, "you've done well to follow. But the circle will finish what it started. The final vessel is ready." Graves' gaze fell upon a figure. At the back, another hooded person manipulating a complex set of gears and tubes that fed the glowing vessels. He realized the horror. The ritual combined alchemy and some dark arcane process. The crystal shards in his coat pulsed in direct resonance with the machinery. If the final vessel completed the circuit, Clara would be consumed, her life force feeding the order. "Mallory," Graves whispered, "we have to disable the altar, or it's over for her." The sergeant nodded, gun shaking in hand. But Graves knew the altar could not be destroyed by conventional means. Its power was tied to the heartbeat of the city itself, to the pulse of grief, and to Clara's tethered soul. From the shadows came a faint voice, almost a murmur. "Nathaniel, hurry, do not falter." The shards vibrated violently, warm and alive against his palm. The hooded figures tightened their circle, chanting in a low, syncopated rhythm that made the walls tremble. Graves tightened his grip on the glowing crystal shards. The pulse thrummed like a second heartbeat in his chest, matching the rhythm of Clara's terrified gasps above on the dais. The hooded figures closed in, their chants vibrating the walls and floor, each syllable a pressure on his mind. Mallory raised his pistol, but Graves shook his head. "Don't waste it. Bullets won't stop what feeds on her life." The woman in black pressed close. "The shards use them to sever the tether. Strike the altar at the heart. You may not get another chance." Graves nodded grimly. The altar's carved serpents writhed in the lantern light, their eyes seeming to glint with malevolent awareness. He approached carefully, each step echoing ominously. Above, Clara's voice whispered faintly, "Nathaniel, hurry before it's too late." Harcourt stepped forward, dagger raised, his serpent ring glinting in the candlelight. "You should have stayed suspended, Inspector. Now you interfere at your peril." Graves ignored him. He reached the altar and placed the shards along the cracks of the stone, letting them resonate with the pulsing vessels. The air quivered as if alive, a low hum rising from the heart of the altar. Shadows flared and twisted around the chamber. Harcourt lunged, dagger slicing through the air. Graves reacted, swinging the shards like a blunt weapon. Sparks erupted as metal met crystal, shattering part of the altar's surface. A shock wave of red light rippled outward, throwing the hooded figures to the stone floor. Clara screamed, not in pain, but as if she felt the tether snapping. The crystal vessels quivered violently, then cracked, shards falling into the stone fissures. The pulse faltered, then grew weaker. Graves pressed on, smashing the central vessel with all his strength. The altar groaned, smoke rising from the fractured stone. Shadows writhed and howled like living things expelled from the room. The chanting died abruptly, leaving only the echo of fleeing footsteps and the pounding of his own heart. Harcourt fell to his knees, clutching the remnants of his dagger, eyes wild. No, this cannot be. Graves ignored him, sprinting to the dais. Clara lay still, her chest rising shallowly. He lifted her in his arms. "It's over, Clara. It's over." Above them, the faintest hint of moonlight penetrated the chamber. The woman in black stood at the shadow's edge, watching. "The circle is broken," she whispered. "For now. But its roots run deep. The order always finds a way." Graves held Clara tightly, chest heaving. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the chamber disappeared. "Nathaniel?" she whispered, her voice fragile, real. "Yes," he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "I've got you. I've got you." The pulse from the shards faded, leaving only the echo of what had been, a heartbeat once stolen, now returned. Shadows receded, leaving only the cold stone and the distant sound of London's waking city above. The city was quiet, but Graves felt no relief. The circle had been broken, yes, but he knew their roots ran deep, hidden in the shadows of London's streets, offices, and alleys. He and Mallory had barely left the underground chamber before the first sign of a fugitive appeared. A hooded figure darted through the fog, moving with unnatural speed, carrying what looked like a satchel clinking with crystal shards. Graves' heart clenched. Some fragment of the ritual had survived, and with it, Clara's tether could still be threatened. "After him!" Graves shouted, sprinting across the slick cobblestones. Mallory followed, bullets fired into the mist, striking nothing but echoes. The figure twisted between narrow alleys, using the fog like a cloak. Graves' mind raced. Each shadow could conceal an ambush, each flicker of light a trap. He barely noticed the waterlogged crates stacked along the docks, the faint smell of brine and rot. Only the rhythmic clink of the fugitive's steps guided him. The chase led them to a small canal where a boat waited, tied loosely to a decayed mooring post. The fugitive leapt aboard, paddling quickly into the fog. Graves dived after him, plunging into the freezing water. Mallory followed with a shout, splashing through the darkness. The fugitive was fast, twisting the vessel through narrow channels, shadows swallowing their movements. Graves' fingers grazed the edge of the boat. Then the fugitive turned, pulling a small blade. Sparks flashed as the shard he carried caught the lantern light. "You won't escape," Graves shouted, gripping the edge of the skiff, plunging his arm into the fugitive's satchel. Metal and crystal clanged. The vessel wobbled violently. The fugitive screamed, trying to maintain balance. A sudden wave rocked the canal. Graves seized the moment, yanking the satchel free. The shards inside pulsed faintly, alive, resonating with the echo of Clara's heartbeat. The fugitive stumbled, disappearing beneath the water's surface with a muffled splash. Graves gasped for air, pulling the shards onto the skiff. Mallory stared wide-eyed. "By God, he's gone." Graves clenched the shards, chest heaving. "No, he's not gone. He's out there somewhere, and he'll try again. The order never gives up." In the distance, fog swirled over the canal, hiding more than it revealed. Shadows moved along the docks, figures standing, watching. Graves understood. This was not just a man fleeing. It was a warning. The circle still had eyes. He looked at the shards pulsing in his palm, each beat faint but undeniable. Clara's tether had been protected for now. But the fugitive's escape meant the ritual could be restarted, elsewhere in some hidden chamber, by someone who knew the sequence by heart. Mallory shook his head. "Sir, what do we do now?" Graves sat alone in the dimly lit back room of a tavern tucked along Fleet Street, the shards from the fugitive's satchel resting on the table before him. Their pulsing glow cast faint red reflections against the grimy walls, like dying embers. Mallory leaned against the doorframe, still soaked from the canal, muttering about the insanity of hunting a secret society across all of London. "Sir," he said finally, voice strained, "we've barely seen the surface of this. The circle this Ouroboros, its reach, it's everywhere." Graves didn't look up. He traced the patterns on the shards with a gloved finger. Each one bore a fragment of the alchemical diagrams from St. Bartholomew's crypt. When combined, they revealed a lattice of circles and intersecting lines almost like a map. But what it mapped wasn't streets or landmarks. It was people, a network, a web. "I know," Graves murmured. "Every person we've encountered, the constables, Harcourt, even Dorn herself, they were all nodes. And there are more." Mallory's eyes widened. "More? How many?" Graves shook his head. "Impossible to say. They hide in offices, households, churches, even among those who swear loyalty to the crown." The tavern door creaked. Graves snapped to attention, hand on the shards. A figure slipped inside, hood drawn low. The room's shadows swallowed them. "You move too cautiously," the stranger said, voice familiar. Graves' heart lurched. It was the woman in black. "I have information, but it's dangerous. The Order has begun consolidating its influence throughout the city. There are factions within Scotland Yard, private merchants, and even clergy, all working toward the Circle's resurrection ritual. And one of them is closer to you than you think." Graves' gaze hardened. "Harcourt?" The woman shook her head. "Not him. Someone you have trusted implicitly. Someone who may have watched you for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Mallory muttered, "By God, it's all a trap. Every step we take. They know." "Yes," the woman said. She leaned in, eyes glinting. "And the ritual is far from finished. The Circle is already moving new vessels. If you don't stop them, Clara's tether can be claimed from any one of them. They are hunting her across the city, and across time through alchemical means. That heartbeat you feel in the shards, it can be replicated anywhere." Graves clenched his jaw, pulse racing. "Then we cut the web. Every node, every member, every secret chamber. We burn it down." The woman hesitated. "It won't be easy. The Ouroboros is clever, patient, and ruthless. They won't just let you destroy their work. You'll be hunted, deceived, betrayed. And you must accept. You may not save everyone." Graves leaned back, gaze distant. For the first time in years, the weight of grief, obsession, and determination merged into a single resolve. By first light, the fog had thinned just enough to reveal the twisted alleys of Whitechapel. Graves led the way, shards tucked securely in his coat. Mallory close behind, pistol ready but eyes sharp. The streets were eerily silent, shadows stretching unnaturally between narrow buildings. "This alley," Graves muttered, pausing at the entrance to a narrow corridor of broken cobblestones and leaning walls. Matches the map the shards are showing. The first faction's lair should be here. Mallory squinted. Looks abandoned. Could be a trap. Graves nodded. It is a trap. They entered. The alley narrowed suddenly, and along the walls hung dozens of small mirrors, fractured, angled, catching the early sunlight in disorienting flashes. Each reflection multiplied their images a dozenfold, creating the illusion of figures standing behind them. "By God," Mallory whispered, stepping carefully. Graves' hand rested on the shards. The pulse from them grew stronger, syncing with his heartbeat, resonating with the mirrors. It wasn't just a trap, it was a ritual set up. The Order had perfected their craft here, creating illusions that preyed on grief, memory, and fear. From a reflection in the mirrors, a figure appeared, a hooded member of the Order, motionless yet seeming to move closer with every blink. Graves aimed his revolver, but the figure multiplied, appearing in every mirror around them. Mallory's voice trembled. "Sir, which one is real?" Graves' eyes narrowed. "Does it matter?" He dashed forward, smashing the nearest mirror with the shards. The glass exploded, and the figure let out a shriek. One voice, clear, resonant, before vanishing. But for every mirror destroyed, two more reflections seemed to animate, their eyes glowing faintly red. From the shadows behind, a dagger whistled past Mallory's head. Graves fired blindly, shattering another mirror. The shards of glass reflected the Order's symbols, serpents, and interlocking circles, almost alive, pulsing in rhythm with the crystal shards he carried. The alley seemed endless. With each step forward, the reflections became more deceptive, showing images of Clara, her face pleading, her eyes wide, lips trembling. Graves felt the weight of memory and grief pressing on him, each mirrored image like a voice calling him to failure. Then he noticed the subtle difference. The real Clara wasn't among them, yet the mirrors tried to convince him otherwise. He inhaled sharply. The Order wants you distracted. He smashed another mirror, then another, clearing a path. Mallory held his revolver steady, eyes darting between every reflection. Finally, at the end of the alley, a narrow doorway led into darkness. Graves pressed forward. The pulse of the shards grew unbearably strong, almost screaming through his palm. He felt the ritual's energy here, concentrated, waiting. Somewhere ahead, the faction's leader lurked, and the final stages of the Circle's plan were within reach. Graves stepped through the narrow doorway, lantern trembling in hand. The room beyond was vast, vaulted, lined entirely with mirrors from floor to ceiling. Candlelight flickered across each pane, reflecting a dozen versions of himself and Mallory, multiplying into an endless corridor of shadows. The shards in his coat pulsed violently, resonating with the room. Each beat carried a whisper. Clara. Nathaniel. From the far side of the chamber, a figure emerged, hooded and still. Graves recognized the posture, the deliberate calm. The faction's leader. Harcourt had been the orchestrator within Scotland Yard, but this figure was someone else entirely, a master of deception, whose identity had been hidden until now. Inspector Graves, the figure intoned, voice distorted through the mirrors. You've come far, but the Circle cannot fail. Not now. Graves tightened his jaw. You've already lost. The ritual's vessels are destroyed. The altar is broken. The figure laughed softly. Do you understand what you hold? He gestured to the shards. Those fragments pulse with the heartbeat of the final vessel. You carry her tether, Clara's life, and the circle's power flows through your hands. Destroy the shards, and you destroy her as well. Fail to destroy them, and the Order's resurrection will continue. Mallory whispered, trembling. Sir, what do we do? Graves' eyes darted to the mirrors. Reflections of Clara appeared in each pane, some crying, some screaming, some reaching out toward him. But one reflection, faint and steady, matched the shard's pulse. It wasn't an illusion. You're trying to trick me, Graves said aloud. I won't be fooled. The figure advanced, moving seamlessly through the reflections. With every step, the mirrors distorted reality, making it impossible to discern truth from illusion. Graves felt the weight of every memory with Clara press against him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. He realized suddenly the circle's power wasn't just alchemical. It fed on grief, desire, and hope, using it to manipulate perception. Trust the heartbeat, whispered Clara's voice from within the shards. Only the pulse is real. Graves focused, letting the shard's rhythmic glow guide him. Every mirror he smashed revealed more empty space, clearing illusions. The faction leader hissed, slashing toward him with a ceremonial dagger. Graves parried with a shard, sparks flying. Mallory engaged the remaining figures in the chamber, buying Graves' precious seconds. The battle became a blur of movement, glass and echoes, reflections twisting every step. Finally, Graves reached the center of the room. The shards pulsed brighter than ever, forming a tether between him and the faint image of Clara. He smashed the final mirror, and the illusion shattered. The faction leader staggered back, revealing himself. Not a stranger, but someone Graves had trusted deeply, a colleague, whose loyalty had been twisted by the circle over years. Graves' hands trembled as he held Clara's fragile form. She blinked, alive, trembling, but safe at least for the moment. The shards in his coat were dark now, their pulsing heartbeat stilled, as if the tether had finally been severed. Clara, he whispered, voice raw. It's over. I've got you. She clung to him, lips quivering. Nathaniel, I didn't think. Her voice faltered, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. But Graves knew better than to believe it was truly over. Somewhere in the twisting alleys, abandoned crypts, and fog-laden streets of London, the Ouroboros still lingered. The Order's influence had been struck, but it had not been extinguished. Mallory, bruised and exhausted, scanned the ruined chamber. Sir, the shards, are they gone? Graves shook his head. Destroyed enough, but the pulse remains faint, a reminder. We can't let them recover. He glanced at Clara, then back at the chamber. Broken mirrors littered the floor, splintered symbols carved into the walls. The faintest trace of red light shimmered in the debris heartbeat. That refused to die. A sudden noise echoed through the ruins, a faint shuffle, careful and deliberate. Graves stiffened, hand on his revolver. From the shadows emerged the last surviving member of the faction, Ashi, young acolyte who had fled the previous chaos, carrying fragments of the ritual in desperation. Graves stepped forward, eyes narrowed. It's finished. There's no place left for you. The acolyte trembled, raising empty hands. I didn't want this. I only followed orders. You follow no one now, Graves said firmly. The circle has no hold here. Not on her. Not on you. With that, he seized the final crystal fragments, pressing them to the ground. The shards glowed faintly, then shattered in a flash of light. The pulse vanished, leaving only silence. The acolyte collapsed, sobbing, while Graves turned to Clara. Outside, dawn broke across London, fog burning off the river and streets. Gas lamps flickered as the city awoke. Graves and Clara stepped into the morning, hand in hand, the weight of grief and obsession gradually lifting. "You saved me," Clara whispered, voice trembling. "No," Graves said, voice steady. "We saved each other. But the city, it will always have shadows, and I will always be here to face them." Mallory clapped Graves on the shoulder, a rare smile breaking through the exhaustion. "By God, sir, I thought we'd lose you both." Graves let himself exhale, finally allowing the tension to leave his shoulders. The echoes of the Ouroboros had been silenced for now. The circle's intricate web had been unraveled, and the heartbeat that had bound Clara had been freed. As they walked into the streets of London, the city alive around them, Graves knew the memory of the past years would never fade, but neither would the knowledge that light could still pierce even the deepest shadows.